to stay in the government, thank you, the government career panels, you will be able to just stay in this room. For those of you interested in joining the private sector and academia panel or the professional development opportunity panel, then we will have breakout rooms where you will be able to sign up yourself to move in those rooms. If you have any difficulty or need assistance, our staff will be monitoring the chat, and we will gladly move you into those rooms that you wish to go to. So we will repeat this information when it gets closer to the time to do that. And we're just, again, really happy to have you join us throughout the presentations. Again, please share your comments in the chat or any questions that we can help you with. And now it is my opportunity to introduce you to the Director of the Language Program Office, Laura Hammond. Laura has been working with the University of Wisconsin-Madison since 2003. She is the U.S. Director of the American Institute of Pakistan Studies and the founding Director of the Language Program Office here at UW-Madison in the International Division. Her career working with South Asia programs at UW started with the South Asia Summer Language Institute, SASLI, in 2003, and she began working with AIPS in 2006 and became the U.S. Director in 2010. In addition to her work with AIPS and SASLI, Laura has been the U.S. Director for the American Institute of Bangladesh Studies, AIBS, from 2008 to 2019. Laura was instrumental in bringing new international and language programs to the UW. In 2012, she became the Executive Director for Project Global Officer, and in 2016 became the Administrative Director for the South Asian Flagship Language Initiative, followed by adding to her directorship the Indonesian Flagship Language Initiative in 2018 and the Turkish Flagship Language Initiative in 2020. Due to the strength of these programs, Ms. Hammond was selected by the Dean and the International Division to direct the Language Program Office in 2020, and in April of 2020, she received the UW Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Leadership. So thank you, everyone, for being here, and let me introduce Laura.
Thank you very much, Felicia. It sounds like I'm a lot busier than I probably actually am, but thank you for that. So good afternoon and hello to everyone. On behalf of the Language Program Office in the International Division at UW-Madison, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the LCTL Career Fair. This fair supports the mission of the International Division to cultivate the next generation of global citizens. I'm glad to see so many people are interested in this event with 122 registered attendees. I'm grateful to the sponsors and exhibitors who are supporting this event and the panelists who have agreed to share the wisdom with us, as well as to the Language Program Office teachers and staff for their efforts to bring this fair to you. A special thanks to Dr. Felicia Lucht, the Director of the Wisconsin Intensive Summer Language Institutes and the Academic Director for the LPO, for the hard work that went into preparing for this fair, and all the staff who are chairing the sessions and working behind the scenes today. Thank you to the LCTL Career Fair Event Coordinator, Matthew Adepetty, Essie Lechner, who has been our event consultant, and the event moderators, Paige Hendricks, Kylie Holland, Sarah Linkert, Carrie Uniol, Lisi Doty, and Marissa Beatty. We're also grateful to the generous support of our sponsors and co-sponsors, which include the Institute for Regional and International Studies, the African Studies Program, the Center for East Asian Studies, the Center for Russia, East Europe, and Central Asia, the Center for South Asia, the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, European Studies, the Language Institute, Latin American, Caribbean, and Iberian Studies, the Middle East Studies Program, and the Russian Flagship Program. I'm extremely pleased that Alfred Boll, Director of the Office of American Spaces in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State, will deliver our keynote, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing his remarks. I hope that beyond your time in Whistler, you will find more ways to engage with the world. Please know that more opportunities are available to develop your own global perspective, which can be beneficial no matter what field you plan to pursue. The need for those who can work across languages, cultures, and society has never been more important than it is today. So I hope that those of you in attendance will find this to be a valuable opportunity to make connections that will give insights on career options and directions in which you can take your language learning. Thank you again for being here today. I'm certain there'll be some fascinating conversations, many of which I hope will continue well beyond this fair today. The next speaker on our list is Dr. Chenad Chiklosh. Chenad manages and oversees the programming of IRIS NRC, that's a National Resource Center, and serves as a program director of APLI. Prior to joining IRIS NRC, he held positions in the Institute for Regional and International Studies as assistant director for students and curriculum and academic advisor for the International Studies major, and in European Studies as the assistant director. He has considerable experience in the field of language learning, having previously been a lecturer in Norwegian at UW-Madison and a private consultant, editor, reviewer, and translator for the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, Rosetta Stone, and the University Language Services. Without further ado, I'd like to pass the introductions now on to Chinad.
Thank you very much, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chinad Shiklosh, and I'm the Associate Director of the Institute for Regional and International Studies, the National Resource Center. IRIS NRC is funded by the US Department of Education, and our mission, very simply put, is to support and enhance global awareness and inspire informed thinking about the complexities of our world. The cornerstone to achieving this is through language learning, and key to our mission is the support of language study. Our center is intimately connected with the promotion of language learning, from supporting instruction and provision of language courses to awarding Federal Foreign Language and Area Studies FLAS fellowships to students studying LCTLs, through our partnership with Whistly and our support of this career fair, and particularly in our close working relationship with the Arabic, Persian, and Turkish Language Institute, APLI. It has been a particular pleasure, after 2 summers of virtual language programming, to have welcomed students to our campus again. I've enjoyed meeting APLI students, learning of their motivations for studying our languages, and hearing about their goals for their language learning, whether academic, career, or personal, or a combination. I would like to recognize every Whistly 2022 student across the 6 institutes for your commitment to language study. These are grueling, intensive language programs. There are, I'm sure, moments or even days of frustration and confusion, but for every one of those, there are the wonderful aha moments, the eureka moments when things just fall into place. And the gains you have made in the past 6 weeks are quite remarkable. I wish you success for the last 2 weeks of your programs. I hope you will look back on your time this summer with great fondness and can be excited at the considerable advances you have made. I also wish to thank you for putting our mission into practice. Now, I'm not sure how many of you will go on to study 9 languages and gain advanced proficiency in 5, but our keynote speaker has done just that today. And it is my privilege to have been asked to introduce him. Alfred Boll is the Director of the Office of American Spaces in the US Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. He supervises a team of 25 staff members in Washington and a corps of 26 Foreign Service officer specialists around the world, providing strategic direction for the department's 600 American spaces, the US government's primary public, cultural, and information centers abroad. American Spaces provide free and open access for communities around the globe, offering programs and events that foster learning, discussion, and civic engagement around democratic principles. Dr. Boll has been a United States Foreign Service officer since 2003 and previously led the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs Education USA branch from 2016 to 2019 to promote study in the United States. He has served overseas in Amsterdam, Baghdad, Lisbon, Pristina, and Rio de Janeiro, and in Washington in the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. He is a lawyer by training, admitted in California, Wisconsin, and New South Wales in Australia. He holds a BA honors degree from the University of Chicago in political science, JD and MA Latin American and Iberian Studies degrees from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and a doctorate in international law from the University of Sydney. Prior to joining the department, Boll was a delegate and legal advisor to the International Committee of the Red Cross from 1993 to 2003, based in Jakarta, Hong Kong, and Sydney. In relation to his time at UW-Madison, I understand that Dr. Boll's professor back in the 1990s, Severino Albuquerque, is in attendance today, and I wish to welcome him. A native speaker of English and heritage speaker of German, Alfred Boll is a lifelong language learner who has test scores in 9 languages from the Department of State's Foreign Service Institute, 5 of which are at levels between full professional proficiency and native or bilingual proficiency. As a student, he participated in study abroad programs in Switzerland, France, and Germany. I ask you to join me in welcoming Alfred Boll.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siklosh, for such a nice introduction, and my great thanks to the university and to the whole team for the opportunity to engage you all today in what is really an exciting event. I want to congratulate you all on your choice to undertake dedicated language study and in such a wonderful way that shows the true value of linguistic diversity. The Less Commonly Taught Languages program is an inspiration to all of us who know that every language is valuable and the key to real communication and understanding that allows human beings to work together to solve problems big and small. I don't think it's overstating things to say that without people who can understand each other in a deep and meaningful way, which to me means being able to reach out to others in their own language, we will not be able to solve the great challenges that face humanity today. My current position in the State Department is in a bureau that is wholly focused on fostering mutual understanding between people through in-person exchanges, through initiatives like the Fulbright program that sends Americans around the world and brings people from all corners of the globe to the United States, as well as platforms for us to reach out, like our network of 600 cultural centers worldwide that I now work on American Spaces. While one of the things that we do in American Spaces is to promote English language learning, we know that having Americans with the capacity to reach out around the world through all languages, especially less commonly taught ones, is a crucial part of the world understanding the United States and forging ties of mutual friendship and support for one another. At the Department of State, we use all of the languages that you are learning and many more. Our language school at the Foreign Service Institute currently provides instruction in over 65 languages so that government representatives can reach out to people around the world in the most meaningful and direct way. It's probably safe to say that all of us here have our own views of the value of the ability to communicate in another language and actually take pleasure in learning languages. We understand this as personal enrichment and our capacity to engage the world and others in new ways. It's fascinating, captivating. It pushes us. It certainly pushes me. Along those lines, what has surprised me the most in terms of personal discovery is when words don't translate the same ideas. Looking for those unique parts of each language that relate to ideas differently and thinking about what that means for how we are actually communicating is fascinating to me. How do you translate a word whose meaning involves a complex idea that doesn't have a 1 or 2 word equivalent in English, or vice versa when that happens? Languages are much more than words because they describe the world around us in many clever and different ways. I'm convinced that learning different languages has certainly made me a better communicator in English because I tend to think much more about how the person I'm speaking to is going to understand what I'm saying. Just the experience of having had to convey complex ideas in another language has changed how I approach communicating in English. I'm much less likely to take communication for granted, what lawyers, if you will, call, when they deal with contracts, call a meeting of the minds. When we communicate, we have to think, have I really been understood? Have I really reached a meeting of the minds? Lawyers think about this, of course, because contracts are important, and one can have a written contract, an oral contract, and yet the idea at the end is that we have reached an understanding that both of us share. And I think that language learning allows us to tackle those issues in the same ways, or different ways that as we lawyers have to when thinking about, have we really been understood? I'm also convinced that learning languages has helped me to see the world differently, and also maybe to see human beings differently. Understanding why someone might see the world through a different lens, through understanding their language, goes a long way to thinking about how we might address the big problems that face humanity today: climate change, promoting human rights, combating disinformation, implementing views of justice. The list goes on, but we can't do them alone. For us in diplomacy, it can't just be a matter of saying the right words. They have to be said in the right way, in a cultural and linguistic context, if we are going to actually reach out in a meaningful way that will have an effect on others' opinions, that will allow us to make our case or explain ourselves. And just as there are so many ways that language learning gives us the potential to develop ourselves as individuals and enrich our personal lives, I'm convinced that they do the same for us professionally. And so I'm very happy that you are all at this career fair thinking about how you and how we all can do that in practice as we go through our personal and professional lives. I guess the first thing I would want to say along professional lines is that not everyone will understand or have the same view of the advantages of learning a language, and perhaps perspectives of someone who invested a lot of time in learning a language. And so in my experience, it's up to all of us who are job seekers, who are trying to approach employers, to think about ways to explain this to people who don't have those experiences. A lot of people may assume that language learning is about a hobby or focused on traveling. They may never have thought about these issues. And so it's important to find the right way, just as we look for the right words in any language, to communicate the value. Of course, many employers, and I want to emphasize this, do understand the value of learning a language. And if I could give you one piece of advice to reach out to any employer, it's to think about the ways how they might benefit depending on their existing business and how it might grow or develop. We can never stop doing our homework. We can never take for granted that any part of our background is going to be attractive or understood. And it's the same for any language. It's rare that there are jobs that only require a language. A language is usually something that is seen as an extra, as an attribute. And so it's important to look for those ways when how one can describe what that means in terms of an individual employer. Like for any job search, you have to do your homework and you have to do your thinking, and you have to then apply that to each different case. I'll come back to that idea in the panel session later when we speak about working for government and the Department of State, when we talk about the pleasure that it is to work with the USA Jobs website. So if I can come back to bigger issues about employment, think about the wider issues behind learning a language. I think my views about the advantages about communicating apply here to an employer. Explain to an employer what it meant to invest in learning a language. Explain to them the context. Explain that it made you a better writer, ideally, in English, communicator, thinker, because all of those things are the things that our employers are looking for in any case. You can turn this to your advantage by explaining the context of language learning, not just the end result in relation to any specific language and the knowledge that you required. This happened to me in my own life in a kind of a strange way when I was a senior in college, in my fourth year, where I was in Chicago. We had a career department that helped us with job interviews. And you had to bid. This was in the dark ages, a long time ago. You had to bid on the employers. You had to create a ranked list of who you wanted to interview with, and because there was a lot of competition. And I interviewed with a few investment banks. and in fact did quite well with one of them, which I can name now because it doesn't exist anymore. It was called Credit Suisse First Boston, and it's been taken over. At the time, the fact that I was studying Chinese, that I had done it for 3 years, I was actually a political science major, but I'd always wanted to learn Chinese, was captivating to the hiring manager. She called me actually a few times, not to talk about my ability to work on spreadsheets or crunch numbers or do the things, in fact, that the job required, but she just wanted to ask me one more time, how many characters did you learn? What time did you get up every morning to learn them? Can you tell me about that again? I think before she made the job offer, she wanted to be assured that, in fact, I was someone who's going to work hard and who was going to do the number crunching that they wanted. It wasn't about Chinese. It was about everything surrounding the fact that I had made the effort to learn it. So don't take that for granted. It's something that I think can be communicated in a very direct way, and you can think about unique ways to do that. Every language is useful somewhere, sometime. Never give anything you've done short shrift. The fact that a language is less commonly taught should not make one iota of a difference as far as I'm concerned. It's about the fact that you did it, and it's about that every place in our globalized society is important, and that there are places that are going to value both the specific language as well as everything around that. Twice in my life, the fact that I knew a particular language was actually definitional in how my career developed, and in ways that I would never have been able to anticipate. My first job after grad school with the International Committee of the Red Cross, which is the part of the Red Cross that works in wars or internal tensions and disturbances, involved. So they were going to send me to Colombia as the first place, and it was because I spoke Spanish. I had tested at a high level in Spanish. I had always loved Spanish, and they needed people to go. And then 3 days before I was supposed to depart, they called me in and said, "Wait a second, wait, you speak Chinese?" And I said, I can get by. I've tested at the following score, and yes, I love it. And they said, "Oh, well, Colombia's off. We can find someone else to go because we have more Spanish speakers. We don't have anyone who speaks Chinese, and we are doing a series of prison visits in Malaysia, which is covered by our delegation in Jakarta. So you're going to Jakarta, and you're going to spend the next 4 months visiting every prison in Malaysia." And that's what I did. And after that, I was, because I was based in Jakarta, I was kept there for almost 2 years, about a year and a half, and had what for me was an amazing, meaningful experience in Indonesia. A chance to learn some Indonesian, a chance to get to know a wonderful country, a beautiful place, a completely different place to anywhere I'd been and any part of my experience. And so it really was a big change. And it was simply because I was the person they needed at the right time. The second time that happened to me was when I joined the Foreign Service. When the first 2 assignments as a Foreign Service officer are what is called directed assignments. We do not get to choose where we go. We can put down preferences on a list, but the Foreign Service decides. There was one position where they needed someone who spoke Portuguese. And I was one of 3 people in my entering class who had a sufficient score in Portuguese, but neither of the 2 of them wanted to go to Portugal. One said, I've got 3 kids. It's going to be very expensive there with the euro. Euro was very high then. It was probably 1.3 to the dollar. The dollar was 1.3 to the euro. The other colleague really wanted to go somewhere else and to broaden her own experience. And so I was sent to Portugal because I was simply the right person in the right place with the right place, with the right skills. So don't give that short shrift. The fact that you are investing in this experience is something that will be an asset for your entire lives. Be proud of it, own it, and keep up with it. So because knowing languages means for institutions that when they need someone, you are the first person to whom they're going to turn. Before ending, if I can maybe add just a few perspectives from me personally, as someone who's really had what I consider the privilege of using my own love of languages in the workplace in what for me has been a very enriching and a meaningful way. You have all invested a lot in this program. Don't let it stop here. Be creative in finding ways to use your language, the language that you're working on now, even as you learn others, even as you do other things in life. Love it and live it. Don't just take one class and say this is finished. It really is about long-term mastery, not being shy in using the language, making it a part of you. From a purely personal point of view, I can say that too many of us in the Foreign Service don't keep our languages alive. The institution does have incentives to try and help us do that, but everyone's busy. People are sent different places. It's hard. And yet, I'm very conscious of the fact that the taxpayer paid for me to spend 10 months learning Serbo-Croatian at the Foreign Service Institute. And I look at that as a responsibility. I look at the responsibility of saying, I need to keep my mastery of the language at least at an acceptable enough level that when the institution needs me again to use this language, I will be able to do that in a meaningful way and quickly. So even if there's no responsibility, doing that is important and is a great thing in your life. Don't let this simply lie fallow. And if at some point you work for an institution that has somehow invested in language acquisition, please look for it to create incentives for people to keep their mastery. I think that's very important, and I think that institutions need to think very much about this in terms of how they say we've invested in this this coworker. We want to keep that investment alive for us. Don't get pigeonholed. Languages are a means to communicate about lots of things. Make mistakes. I make tons of mistakes. I married a Dutchman, and my Dutch is okay, but he's still, well, I can tell when I've made a mistake because he'll kind of smirk, but won't say anything. That's the way we learn. Maybe some of you have read about people who are so talented at language learning that they, I read about a guy who sort of got on a plane and 14 hours later said, yeah, he spoke Finnish. There are people like that. I am not one. I can't do that. Every bit has been a lot of investment and time. So make mistakes and keep it real. I think that's the way we have experiences, and that's how we learn and we make progress. Encourage others to discover languages, to understand what the experience you had, the value personally and professionally, and help them. For many people, languages it causes fear, right? It's like math. I'm still afraid of math. I'm very glad that I went into a profession that doesn't really require it, at least for me in my job. And yet, if I had people who could really maybe translate it for me in a way, if maybe I would make the effort, maybe I wouldn't be so afraid. Maybe it would be something that is more approachable for me. And lastly, thank and recognize those who help you, those who support you, those who motivate you, and who open this world to others. It is such a pleasure and honor for me to know that Professor Emeritus Severino Albuquerque is on this call. He is one of the UW's great professors in the tradition of not just Portuguese language and literature studies, but Brazilian studies. One of the UW's great Brazilianists along the lines of Thomas Skidmore and so many others who made the UW the reference for many, many years on Brazil. And I'm Professor Albuquerque did not just open the world of Brazil to me, but the whole world of the Portuguese language and much beyond. Recognize those people and help them when you can, because it's all of us together in showing what languages mean and how we can put them to good use, we hope, for humanity and for better outcomes for all of us in this world. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure, and I really look forward to hearing about your plans and engaging further about careers that involve lots of languages.
Thank you, Dr. Boll, and everyone, please virtually join me in thanking Dr. Boll for this really great keynote and start for our event. So we have a few questions that we'd like to get started with, but just as a reminder, if you have any comments or questions that you would like to share with our keynote or later on with the other panelists, please put them in the chat. We have our folks moderating the chat and can save them. So if we could start out with the question, what are some good skills to develop in addition to language learning? So skills that would pair well with these types of careers and having language ability.
So from my perspective, certainly writing. Good writing is about good thinking. In my experience, when we have problems with writing, when we do a lot of cables, we do a lot of, the State Department has to report, right, about what's going on. We have to engage public, so it's both public and internal. And, it's easy for I think to fall back on saying, I wrote what it was and that's it. It's important to be succinct. It's important to think about what is the idea behind this. Just like in language, when you're looking for the right word, when you're trying to find that right way to express an idea, I think forcing oneself to be a good writer in terms of having thought about what is the message, what am I conveying, that's something that to me goes hand in hand with this. So writing and communication, messaging. When we think about how we are dealing with public or internal audiences, crafting that message is extremely important. When I think, lawyers are taught to divide the world of law into substance and procedure. Substance meaning, what does the law say, right? What's the bottom line? Can I do this? Can I not? What are the parameters? But how you do something, the procedure behind things. Did you file the case on time? Was the motion on time? All of those things around it are equally important. And I think that in life, looking for experiences that teach you both is very important. When you're in a company, when you're in an academic setting, looking for ways to understand systems, how they function. It's oftentimes not just about getting the subject matter right, it's about the way you do things. And so whether you're dealing with public policy, whether you're dealing with marketing, whether you're dealing with a company that's working on investments, knowing how structures work, I think is very important.
Absolutely. What recommendations do you have for people who, like you, want to learn many languages? So one of the slogans we had for our programs this year was "Your future is multilingual." So what tips would you have for folks who are also ambitious and want to learn more than one language?
So my own perspective is don't do too much at the same time. It's easy to get distracted and sort of, we all get to plateaus, at least I certainly do in language learning. And then to really go beyond when you've reached a plateau requires a lot of work. It requires years of work. And so I would say, don't be in a hurry. It's for me, and again, it's just a personal perspective, it's worthwhile looking for a level of mastery that goes beyond the basics, because it's then that you start to be able to really communicate. And I think when you also become of more, greater value to an employer who is not just looking for someone who can do the basics, because frankly, these days, Google Translate does a lot. It's pretty amazing. AI is going to take over in this. And yet the finesse, that is going to continue as far as I can see to be human. And so achieving a good level is important, and I would stick with that before going to another language.
Great. So would you be able to comment on opportunities for native speakers of Pashto in the market that you're aware of?
So I don't know specific ones. What I would say is that there are lots of opportunities for Pashto speakers in relation to any organization that is working in South Asia, whether it's Afghanistan or Pakistan. And you will see, for example, we have a lot of refugees arriving who are Pashto speakers. So there will be a lot of community organizations. There will be a lot of refugee support organizations. There will be employers. There will be, different places who may not understand that they could benefit from a Pashto speaker. But if you can explain that and to say, look, you now have a population of people near you, you'll know that refugees sometimes work in certain sectors of the US economy. And so looking at what those are, looking at where people have gone and seeing how the community is responding and and what the dynamic is, it will require research, but it's absolutely possible. And I think you can do this with any language. Look and see where people are going, what the issues are, and then, how you might fit in.
Great. For individuals currently in degree programs, what suggestions do you have for building language skills and getting international experience while studying?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I always think, any opportunity for immersion is great. I can say that. So one of the things that they do with us at the Foreign Service Institute is that we're given, as part of a language course, not always, but often, we're given the opportunity to go to a country where the language is spoken at our own cost. So the government doesn't pay, we pay, but they pay for the teacher. So you need a certain amount of people, right? They need to approve it as okay. But I spent 2 weeks in Belgrade when I was learning Serbo-Croatian. And it really made a huge difference, because although our teachers were superb and dedicated and we had intensive good courses, just being surrounded by the language day in, day out was a huge thing. If you have research papers that you're working on, it's important to see, for example, where are the collections that might benefit me. What I would do when I was working on my doctorate, it made a huge difference to go and work at different libraries around the world, because their collections were hugely different. And I would not have found, had I not gone different places, I wouldn't have found half the stuff that I then really relied on in terms of my own thesis. And so if you can look for opportunities to do research in a meaningful way, and there are, scholarships and foundations that support this kind of thing, look for those opportunities, because I think that, can be really meaningful, both in terms of your research as well as then your language knowledge.
So speaking of opportunities, that a lot of opportunities with government may involve types of security clearances. Are there opportunities that do not have these types of clearances, or other ways to become involved in government employment?
So I'm not an expert, so I can't say definitively. I know that depending on the department one works for, at least residency is required, and in many cases citizenship, and the ability to acquire a security clearance. Sometimes those there are different levels of clearances. The lowest level is one that's called, I think, a public trust clearance, followed by a secret, top secret, and so on. What I would say is, when you look at any job, look at what the requirements are first. The first thing is to check, what do they require? Am I in a position to get this? There are certainly parts of the government where you don't have to be a citizen, and where you can be a permanent resident to apply, but you do have to have permission to work in the US. So that's one of the things. Now, for non-US citizens, the US government, certainly we employ thousands, tens of thousands of locally employed staff all around the world. And embassies and consulates are made up mostly, in most places, the vast majority of staff are not Americans. Probably between 70 and 90% in many places of staff are non-American. And so there are lots of opportunities where you don't need a clearance at all, at least the kind that you would in the United States, for employment overseas. There are also lots of organizations beyond the government that offer employment, both who may get you the right kind of permission to work in the United States or employ you overseas because of particular knowledge.
Now, you've mentioned a number of your experiences, and we have a question that for folks who are finishing college and getting ready to move into their careers, are there any activities or internships that you would recommend that would be seen as particularly advantageous?
So my own perspective on this is that all experience is good experience. It's about explaining to an employer why it was meaningful and what it allowed you to do, to learn, and how it pushed you. It's all about the context. Certainly at the State Department, I can say that all kinds of internships and previous employment are seen as great. In fact, I don't know if they say this officially, but so this is my personal sense of this, is that they don't want people to take the Foreign Service exam too young, too early. They want people who have a certain amount of life and professional experience behind them. One, because it probably makes people more likely to stay and to say, I'm going to have a full career at the department. And it also makes sure that people are coming to the department with an array of useful skills that they have gotten elsewhere that they can apply for the department. So I would say everything is good. It's about how you couch it. It's about how you talk about it and your ability to sell it, right? To say that this was valuable for me because, and this is why it's valuable to you. I think employers, my own experience in the private sector, although it's been a while, but I did work for an investment management company for 2 years. And their approach was much the same. And, I have lots of my friends in the private sector, I think all say the same thing, that they are looking for people with meaningful experiences, and they're very open to people who've done completely different things.
Great. What suggestions would you have for educators and employers to incentivize less commonly taught language learning? So you mentioned that it was important to do that. Do you have any thoughts as to what folks can do to encourage people to do this study and support them?
I think that if all of us do that within our own institutions, we help each other by making it a much more common thing for people to understand. I think that certainly for universities, language programs, and parts of government, it's really incumbent on all of us who rely on people who are learning less commonly taught languages to make sure that broader society thinks about that and understands it. One of the things we are thinking about in American Spaces is how we ensure that, that the American public understands the benefit of what we do. The fact that that everything we do is because we're convinced that it benefits the United States and Americans generally. And so we also have to find the right way to reach out to talk about why we engage people around the world and how that helps the people in the United States. We have some talking points like I love this one. I was saying higher education, bringing international students to the United States is our 5th largest service sector export, bigger than soybeans. It's a great line, right? Bigger than soybeans is people get that. And so all of us looking for ways, certainly within the university community and the academic community, to reach employers and to talk about that bottom line, the wider context, I think will absolutely make a difference.
You've mentioned the importance of all languages. Do you see any trends for the next couple of years of languages that might be more needed at this time than others, or any other thoughts about potential areas of study or regions?
It makes me smile because the question is, it's an excellent question. It's very, I'm not sure I can answer it. It's very hard. I mean, when I started learning Chinese, this was the 1980s. You know, I had a lot of people in my class who were just taken with the fact that China was opening, right? That it was going to be a big deal. And I remember one guy in my class said, yeah, I'm going to go and sell washing machines. Like, that's my purpose in learning Chinese. I'm going to go and conquer the Chinese washing machine market. I think the family had something to do with washing machines. And I always thought to myself, I'm not sure that's the kind of driver that is actually going to get you through, you know, learning this language. It may be the right motivator, I don't know. He lasted a semester. I think the motivation is really important. I think there's no one language. I really believe everyone is important. You can imagine the big economies. China is, no matter what our relationship is, it's a huge economy. We are going to, there's going to be things happening there. Even, you know, Russia right now, we are not having an easy time. And yet learning Russian is going to continue to be very important, given the wherewithal of that country, no matter what. We have not had, you may know that prior to 1980, I think the greatest number of foreign students in the United States were from Iran. And that changed very quickly after the Iranian Revolution. And yet learning Farsi is still super important for us. We need to maintain, you know, the ability to communicate no matter what our relationship is in other contexts. We need to be, and where I sit in educational and cultural affairs, our ability to be an outstretched hand and you know, I think is always important. So my own perspective is all are important, all have tons of potential. It's what you make of them. And it's being creative about them and, you know, and looking for opportunities.
We have a question about naturalized citizens applying for jobs of the Department of State. And are there any suggestions that you would have for people from marginalized communities to better prepare for opportunities for the federal government?
So in relation to naturalized citizens, I can say that I have tons of colleagues who are naturalized, who become Foreign Service officers, and including some colleagues I know who actually met their Foreign Service spouse overseas when the spouse was posted overseas, became American, applied to take the Foreign Service test, did so, passed, and are now in the Foreign Service. So we have a lot of you know, good examples of people from all around the world who are part of representing America overseas. So we have lots of good examples. Sorry, what was the second part?
Just if for individuals from marginalized communities, do you have any recommendations for looking into federal service?
Absolutely. So, you know, there are a number of programs that are related to making sure that we are not just inclusive, but that we are diverse. And so I'm, you know, what I would do is I would look at, and most departments have those, not just the Department of State, but pretty much every government department should have that. And so what I would look at is each, you know, department's website to see what they offer, but you'll find it on their webpage. Certainly you will for the Department of State, as well as USAID. We have programs where one program is for, I think one has to agree to work for the department for 5 years, but it involves us actually paying for master's degree studies. And then coming to work for the Department of State. You do have to take the Foreign Service exam. It's kind of part of the process, but it is, it's a great way, you know, into the department. And it's because we are very serious about saying, we know that we need to be not just to represent America, but be representative of America in the way we hold ourselves out to the world.
Absolutely. So we have a question about going back to language study, and given your extensive experience, how do you keep practicing the languages that you've learned and use? And for example, for those in the institutes with us this summer, we're going to have a lifelong language learning workshop where one of our instructors is going to give people strategies. But what have you done to keep up your language skills and practice when careers and everything and life is very busy?
It's a very good question. I would be disingenuous if I said it wasn't actually, it's difficult, it is. And what I try to do is I try not to shy away from opportunities. And so as soon as I meet someone that I can, without forcing myself on the person, but, practice, I try to do that, even when it's uncomfortable because my brain is not working and I need to, get it circulating again in this language that I haven't spoken for in, years. And that can happen sometimes. I try to watch movies when I can. And so it's about both taking advantage of what comes at you and doing a little bit of planning. It is, I think one does actively have to stay on language learning. I've seen that I tend not to forget, but I get out of practice in a way that I need to meaningfully dedicate myself to relaunching the language. And after a little while, it comes back in a meaningful way.
Wonderful. And so as we get to wrap up this keynote session, kind of thinking about what's next after this event, after people complete summer study with us, or just for folks who are looking to get started with some of these professional development and career opportunities, what would you recommend as the first step? The one thing that can get people started on getting ready to explore these different opportunities for internationalization and language study?
Don't wait, start now. It really is about homework, and it's about not thinking, I'll always have time to do this. It's about taking advantage of where you are now. Your instructors are the best first stop in terms of asking questions about their experiences in the United States, their experiences in different institutions. Talk to your mentors. Take advantage of this opportunity to get perspective and ideas. When I was looking for jobs, there was no internet. We went to libraries and looked at books and kind of, there were whole catalogs that listed institutions, and you kind of had to figure out, what do they do? How do they hire people? And you had to write letters. It's much easier now because of the internet. You can simply go and Google, but you still have to do the work. You have to read about them. You have to look for the opportunities. And then my absolute advice is do not be cowed by rejection. I used to keep a file of all the rejection letters I got from schools, from employers, from different places, just as kind of a reminder that, it's not always going to work. And yet I can say without fail, I'm grateful for the way things have evolved. All of those rejections led me somewhere else. But if you didn't try, there's no path. So you need to do that. You need to be there. And you kind of need to take personal responsibility for it. I wouldn't wait.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for getting us started on these great discussions today. And again, everyone, please join me in thanking Dr. Boll for this invigorating and exciting keynote. To remind everyone of our program now is that we will be moving into 3 separate panel sessions. If there are additional questions that you have for Dr. Boll or for our other panelists about government service, we're going to stay in this room. So please just hang on a moment while we transfer folks into the other panels. If you are interested in learning about opportunities in the private sector or in academia, that will be in our second session panel, and we're going to get those breakout rooms open in just a moment. My colleague Essie Lenchner is working on that. And then there is a third opportunity the session. So if you are not quite ready to think about career opportunities, but really want to look at some different professional development opportunities to help you prepare for additional careers, then that'll be our third panel session. So in just a moment, we're going to make these breakout rooms available. So again, as a reminder, if you would like to stay and learn more about government opportunities, please stay in this room. If you would like to learn about private and academia or in professional development, you're going to see options to join those breakout rooms shortly. If you haven't updated Zoom in a while, you might not have the ability to move yourself in the room. Then please put in the chat what room you would like to be added to and give our staff a moment, and we will help you move to the room that you'd like to be in. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Boll. We will take just a moment to make sure everybody gets in the sessions that they want, and then we'll get started in our panel sessions. So one moment, everyone. Please select your room or let us know if you need assistance.